I grew up in Pitcher, Oklahoma, through the 90s. I was born in '89, so I lived there all the way through the 90s, all the way up till the school closed in 2007. It was hard on a lot of people to have just to get, ripped up out of where you lived and moved on. The town dried up in the 60s and when the mining left. And from that, the population dwindled down to like 2,500 people. By the time I left, it was well down to under 500. When I was younger, I really didn't appreciate the town all that much, being an angsty teenager and everything. But now it's weird going back now to see it. And pretty much, I don't have any physical record of living there. I don't have any pictures of my house. It's weird to go back and stand where my house was. And then just, think about all my formative years. I grew into a person there, but I have no way to go back and have anything to grab onto, if that makes any sense. It feels like a whole other lifetime. A whole other one where this me didn't exist.
The town Pitcher itself actually developed later after the Missouri mines, which were in operation as far west as Galena. About 1914 or 1915 is when the drillers sunk a shaft basically in the hayfields, and lo and behold, it was shallow, and they were able to ascertain that there was ore there, lead and zinc, and it was not at that time believed that there was anything in the Quapaw area. The town, not only Pitcher, but Carden and Treese and Hawkerville, all of these towns developed as mining camps after that initial sinking of the shaft. They grew very, very rapidly. All these mining camps in the area, basically, they provided all the needs for the miners. They would have the stores. You could virtually buy anything you needed to support a family. Let's say as early as 1915, they didn't have a lot of automobiles and so on. They relied on trolleys to get from one town to the other. Lead and zinc was so important to the economy of the United States at this time. And so lead and zinc being produced in the Pitcher mining area was very significant, not only locally, but nationally as well. There was always a market for lead and zinc, especially, we're talking about 1915 here in this area. This greatly enhanced the economy of the area. It was basically the only thing other than farming at that point in time. And so as the mines developed and more lead and zinc was produced, they continued to grow. And virtually everyone would have been involved in the mining, with the exception of those people who had businesses like grocery stores and hotels and so on. The need for lead and zinc both were very vital to the war effort in World War I.
If there was a bullet shot in World War I or World War II, it came from Pitcher.
They began becoming mechanized more and more. Fewer men were needed as the years went by. Being labor intensive and then switching to mechanization, more and more of the miners lost their jobs and so on. It was no longer the pick and shovel day, but they actually had large equipment that was taken apart piece by piece, taken down into the shafts, reassembled, and then you had bulldozers and tractors and trucks and so on like that replaced the men who were at a generation before were using picks and shovels.
It's fitting that, people come out and do stuff like this, because I don't know if I believe in the paranormal stuff, but when you're here, you definitely get the feeling of another presence in this place. Welcome to hell. Through the 90s, the EPA decided to come in. and test the soil for lead levels. And they tested the soil and they tested kids that were living in the town. And most of us were found to have high lead content. So all this here that you see, this is chat. And these big mountains of this stuff got left behind because this was the byproduct of extracting the lead and the zinc and all that. Very unsafe now that I look back at it, you know. Being an adult, like, there's no way that I'd let my kids live in a place like that. People would, you know, fill in their kids' sandboxes with it. Or, you know, we would just play on these mountains growing up. You know, shoes would get full of all the stuff and climb up to the top of them. And I remember sledding down them when I was a kid, and no one ever thought anything about it.
Studies have shown that children, their IQ can be stunted at early ages from exposure to lead. And then, of course, that is what was the inauguration of the buyout process as early as 1980. In the early stages of the buyout process, they would go find homes that had small children, and they were the first ones to have their properties bought out. And then, of course, when they did, the families would move, and then immediately the buildings were torn down. So actually that started it. Cave-ins actually were very, very severe. That, in fact, is the reason why Main Street in the town of Pitcher was condemned. And that would have been either in the 1960s or the early 1970s. And when you have the condemnation of a whole main street of all of the buildings, that is a subject of decline in an area. That's the economy, the businesses, and when they close, then the town kind of dies with it. We lost Yellow Freight and B.F. Goodrich, and when those major industries close, then people lose their jobs. And you're forced to leave in order to find a job to support your families. So I think probably economically that would be a rationale for people leaving. But then if you've lived here all your life, you're retired and so on like that, you don't want to leave your home.
And that tornado was really what just drove the rest of the people out. That was the nail in the coffin for that place. And that was in 2008.
The tornado hit on the south edge of Pitcher itself, came over the chat piles to the west, and then hit on the south edge. Fortunately, it was on the south edge rather than the center of town. It still destroyed something like 114 homes. 6 people were killed. None of the homes were rebuilt, as I understand. So right there, you have 114 homes that are displaced, and the people who live in them would move elsewhere.
From the day that happened, it wasn't maybe 6 months after that there wasn't anybody there anymore.
Pitcher, Cardin, both together, I think they decided about the same time, if I'm not mistaken, that they would just simply cut off all services to the town. So we're talking about water and sewer, and you know, if all of your utilities are cut off in the town, obviously you're not going to want to stay there.
There were houses everywhere. You know, there's like a car wash here. Just, you know, houses everywhere. Now it's nothing. Oh, this pharmacy right here. The guy who built this building here, even after everybody else was bought out or moved, he stayed behind. He wouldn't shut down. And even the people who needed prescriptions that ended up moving to Commerce or Miami, he would drive them over. And then he passed away a couple years ago, actually. People have a crazy spirit about this place. Like, they love it. You know, I guess understandably so.
But those people have, it was home. And you just don't forget those memories of your home.
We are standing on the foundation of my house. This is where I spent 17 or 18 years. You know, right here. It's alien. It's very, very foreign. You know, I'm not the best at like processing that kind of stuff, but it's very weird. You know, like Because as I've said before, because I don't have anything like physical that I can still, go back and, like you go home to like your parents and the house is always there and, stuff like that. But like this, I don't have any pictures of living here, anything like that.